All right, everybody, welcome to CFI Live for May 7th, 2020. 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time today, running a little bit delayed just because, well, we had some fun earlier today. Over at the airport, we were trying to get the last little bit of our Piper Cherokee loaded up, and basically what's left of that Piper Cherokee is this. It is not a whole heck of a lot. That is what we've got in the back of the truck right now is the engine, the firewall, and what's left of the instrument panel. It's kind of sad, really, but that's what we got left there. So it's pretty cool. Been a fun project, and now it's time for us to jump into some of your questions. Some of them from last week that we didn't have time to answer, we'll go ahead and answer now, and then any new questions you guys have, you can of course put them right in this comment section here. And you can see Derek already posted one in there. That's cool. And we will jump into it and get started here. So from last week, first off, talking about some things from last week. The easiest way to find an instructor to train you in your own airplane. So one of the easiest things you can do, I don't know if it's easy, but obviously you can go to your local FBO, join your local clubs, things like EA chapters, right? So you can just look up your local EA chapters, find one near you, go to one of those meetings, and then, ask around, say, hey, I'm looking for an instructor. Who, do you recommend? Who's good? Talk to local guys, see who you gel with. There's lots of guys that will train you in your own airplane. That's half the battle, right? Is finding the plane. So if you have the airplane, well, then great. I'm sure you can easily find a CFI. Sometimes they charge a little bit more to train you in your own airplane, but you can find somebody for a reasonable rate, probably somewhere between the $1,500 an hour range to train you in your own aircraft, depending on what it is and where you're at. These are all the EA chapter maps. There are a lot around the country, so that can be a great resource for you to go call those guys. Even if you don't go to a meeting, just call them, ask around who they know. You can also go to AOPA and their Flight Training Experience Awards. These are the top instructors in the country every year, and you can go through there and see who's on the list in your area. Even if there's not anyone directly at your airport, well, you can still get a hold of one of these people through Facebook or LinkedIn and call around, see who they know that is near your area. So maybe you're in Daytona and you see this guy Brandon from Orlando and you're like, oh man, no one in Daytona, what can I do? Well, call up Brandon and say, hey, do you know anyone in Daytona or in the area that could train me in my own airplane that you would recommend? So that's probably one of the best things you can do to get started with that. Next question we had from last week. Let's see here. We talked about the average check ride cost, looking somewhere between $600 and $1,200 now for an average check ride typically. And Omar asked, the instrument license focuses on using instruments to fly, indeed. What do you learn for your commercial license? Well, the commercial pilot certificate is nothing more than just a private pilot certificate on steroids. If you really want to know exactly what you're going to be tested on for a commercial pilot certificate, you can do CPL-ACS, even though CPL is not the correct term because it's a commercial pilot certificate. It should be CPC, not CPL, but we oftentimes refer to it as CPL, commercial pilot license. And the commercial pilot ACS. So you can come down here, go to the table of contents, and you can see exactly what you're going to have to do, what you're going to be tested on. And you can click on any of these sections that will elaborate on it for you. As far as the maneuvers, things like normal takeoff, soft field, short field, go around, power off 180 is a unique thing for the commercial, just showing more mastery of the aircraft really at this point. Steep turns, steep spiral, chandelles, lazy eights, eights on pylons, a few different maneuvers there you may not have seen from your private pilot days. Slow flight stalls, accelerated stalls is something new that's not always talked about during the private pilot training. And then other things like pressurization, supplemental oxygen, they might ask you just a few more systems questions. It's really just a private pilot check ride with a few new maneuvers and to higher standards, tighter tolerances, showing that you've mastered the aircraft and you're going to be safer, say, than a private pilot. So now you're theoretically safer and you might be able to carry passengers now or do things for hire because you're a little bit better than you were when you were just a private pilot with 40 hours. Let's be real, guys. 40 hours in your logbook, not a lot of flight time. So the minimum for commercial course is 250. Next question we had was, I know if I'm talking to a Tracon with flight following, I can fly through a D airspace, but if I get handed off to my arrival airport's tower, can I still fly through other airports' D airspace? Okay, technically you need to be talking to the controlling agency. So even when I'm talking to TRACON, and this is a really good question actually. So for example, right, we are talking to TRACON approach, and we are flying where there is Delta airspace nearby. So an example of this could be something like, well, obviously Page Field here in Fort Myers, Florida. So I'm cruising through here, and for whatever reason, I'm cruising along at 1,000 feet up the beach, and I decide to turn in. I'm talking to approach, getting flight following, and I decide to cruise right through here through Page's airspace. Well, approach may never tell you to contact Page Tower. Now, it would behoove you to ask and verify, hey, approach, when you're maybe right about here, you want me to talk to Tower, Page Tower, or stay on with you? And if they say, oh, stay on with me, then stay on with them and cruise through the airspace. They say contact Page Tower, do that. They'll oftentimes say, oh, I already called them on the landline, it's cool, you can go through there. Or you might be talking to Fort Myers approach, cruising along here from LaBelle back towards Venice. And so if you're cruising from LaBelle towards Venice, you might be cruising right through Punta Gorda's airspace at 2,000 feet, but talking to Fort Myers approach and getting VFR flight following there, cruising along at 2,000 feet. Again, yes, you can go through the airspace, but you really need to ask before you hit the airspace because you're supposed to talk to the controlling agency. So you need to have two-way radio communication with the controlling agency, with ATC, with Punta Gorda Tower. If you don't have two-way radio communication, well, that's okay. You have two-way radio communication with Fort Myers approach. Thus, they can call on the landline, tell Punta Gorda, hey, this guy's coming through. He's just busting through your airspace there at 2,000 feet and not going any higher or lower. And that's all cool. They can coordinate for you so you don't have to change frequency, so it can reduce the workload for us in the cockpit. Well, ATC picks up some of that workload for us by calling the other guy on the landline. So that is a really good question. By the book, I know what you're saying is, hey, if I'm talking to approach, I don't have to talk to a Delta airport. Well, no, you really need two-way radio communication with the controlling agency, which is Punta Gorda Tower. So legally, yeah, you need to talk to those guys, but they can often get that waived if you just verify with approach. Now, your real question here, what you're asking is, hey, if I am going to arrive to Page, but I'm going to be bumping through Punta Gorda's Class D first, or maybe a more realistic one is up here towards Ann Arbor, Michigan, where we have two Class Delta airports right next to each other. So, hey, I'm going to land in Willow Run. I'm coming from the east, or I'm coming from the west, rather, flying east. And I'm going to land in Willow Run, and approach hands me off to Willow Run Tower, but before I'm actually out of Ann Arbor's airspace, or I'm cruising through Ann Arbor's airspace, well, no, you need to make sure you're cleared through that airspace. All right, the only time you don't have to worry about airspace is when you're IFR. When you are VFR, it is on you to make sure that you're talking to the right people and you're in communication with the right people. So just because you're talking to approach doesn't waive you of all those responsibilities. If approach hands you off to Willow Run Tower and you're out here and you're going to cruise through Ann Arbor's airspace, you need to tell Willow Run Tower, hey, I need a frequency change to contact Ann Arbor. Or could you call them for me and make sure it's cool for me to transit their airspace, say at 2,000 feet or something, or whatever it is, through that area. You need to make sure you're covering all your bases there. It's just good CYA principle. Not that's going to bite you that hard. Yeah, they could potentially give you a pilot deviation, probably only if it causes a traffic conflict. But just for good CYA, ask approach. Just say, hey, can you call that guy for me, or do I need to talk to him? Have you already called him? Always, always, always be talking to the controlling agency, or make sure that you don't have to. Make sure that you have talked to the other person, the other part of ATC you're talking with, and make sure it's cool for you to cruise through a Delta airport or a Charlie airport or whatever it is. If you're going through surface airspace, you probably need to be talking to that tower. So that's typically what they want. Although they can talk on the landline, it can be fine. So either way, CYA guys, make sure you cover yourself. Take a little drink there, lots of talking. All right. Ethan last week asked, if I get, or should I get my private before I go to college to study aviation, or should I wait to get it in college? Well, Ethan, I would highly recommend getting it before college. In fact, the cheapest route, the best route I recommend for guys all the time is go through Part 61 flight training, go to community college, live at home for 2 years while you get all of your ratings done. Once you have all your ratings done and your associate's degree done and you've saved on rent, then you can go for 2 years to a 4-year school, possibly do it online, or go move somewhere, get your bachelor's degree, and while you're getting your bachelor's degree, you'll already be a CFI, and you'll be earning hours building flight time to go to the airlines and get hired with that bachelor's degree as a pilot. Doesn't really matter what the bachelor's degree is in. If you want to study aviation, that's cool. Understand that most aviation programs are nothing more than a business degree with a few extra courses tossed in there for aviation, and you have to pay for those. So your business aviation degree just costs you more than a regular business degree. And given that, well, most people just don't really care what you have a degree in. Whether it's history or art or business. But in my opinion, yes, jump into flight training. I think it is. North Dakota won that 180. Moving on to this week's questions. All right. So Derek first asked, we'll get to Derek's question here. What are some pros and cons of being a CFI? Well, Derek, we'll make this quick because this could be hours of talking here. So I'll give you 3 pros and 3 cons. 3 pros. Well, we'll end on a good note. So let's talk about the cons. Students cancel on you. They don't show up. They don't put in effort. They don't study when you ask them to. You put in a lot of effort, and they oftentimes don't. They'll oftentimes show up late, not do the homework they ask you. Other things is you're putting a lot on the line. It can be not dangerous, but somewhat dangerous, and you're risking your certificate. It's definitely a high workload environment. Not always that well appreciated, and although pay is good out there, you can make $50,000, $100,000 pretty easily as a CFI. Quite frankly, I don't think $100,000 a year as a CFI remotely compensates a pilot who's experienced for getting into an airplane. A bunch of different airplanes, like quite frankly, aren't, they're not as safe as airliners, and getting in there with guys and working far more hours than an airline pilot does and making far less money. So, I think CFIs, one of the cons, is they're a little underpaid. Even at $100 an hour, I still think it's slightly underpaid compared to when you see airline pilots at $350 an hour for doing a lot less work. And you say, oh, they're more experienced. Well, not always. Some CFIs out there have 20, 30,000 hours. So those would be some of the cons. Other cons, so there's 2 good ones. What's the third one? I don't know. It's not really that bad of a job. Depends who you work for. If you work for the wrong place, it can be terrible. And so I guess probably the other con would be if you're working at the wrong place, you could be flying bad equipment, things that just aren't maintained very well, and not being paid very well and being worked terrible hours. Pros, you can make very good money. You can get a fair salary, work in good equipment for a good provider. It is incredibly rewarding to get students through their training and help people earn their private pilot certificate, help people earn other ratings, help people be safe out there. It's a very rewarding job. You can make your own hours. You're at home in your bed every night. There's a lot of pros, actually. And I think probably the biggest one, really, is just the fact that it's rewarding. It's something that I enjoy doing and that you can enjoy doing it. It's also, the last one I'd say would be, it's a good way to build time. I mean, you can build a lot of flight time quickly, but if you're building too much flight time too quickly, well, you're probably not providing the best quality instruction to your students because you really need to be doing a lot of groundwork with them as well before and after their lesson, plus a lot of ground time on your own before they show up and after they leave to properly notate their files, research what you need to be doing with them that day before they show up, and then also do some notation in their files after they leave, and then send them home with some homework so they come better prepared for the next lesson. So there's some pros and cons for you, Derek. Power of Voice says, I'm an AGI, IGI, PPL. Any recommendations to aim next certificate? Yes, get your instrument rating and get your commercial and get your CFI. And that would be what I would go after there. If you want something easier than that, I would say, well, add on a seaplane. Add on a float rating to your private pilot certificate. But an instrument rating is probably the best thing you could do at this point in your career. Would be adding on that IFR cert. Arthur asked, Arthur didn't ask a question, I'm just reading this or I'm talking without actually reading these. Arthur just said howdy from sunny Arizona. Howdy, Arthur. I'll read these to myself before announcing them out loud. It is also sunny here in Florida, and we're leaving here in about 2-3 days, actually, to head back to Alaska, where we'll be doing lots of flight instruction this summer, and really looking forward to that, being back up there in Alaska, and doing some instruction up there will be really cool. It's very pretty up there. So, Ollie said, is there any CFI course in America to the ARAB? Don't really know what you mean by that, but maybe you can clarify. John Woodruff, hey, hope all these I hope all is well. I think these lives are great. Thanks, John. Thanks for tuning in. Other John, hello from London. And Jim Gerhardt, what do you consider minimum IFR equipment? Well, that's a great question, Jim. Besides the legal minimums, like if we go to ecfr.gov, my favorite little website that I reference all the time, when we come down here to Part 91, 205, and it'll tell us minimum equipment for instrument flight, somewhere in here. So, anyways, besides what is actually in here for a minimum equipment to be flying, under IFR, well, you need to, I'd say, having an instrument-rated GPS, not required, but really good. It's preferred for sure. GPS is really huge. If I'm going to fly, I guess if your question is, what do I need to go fly in the clouds? I need 2 attitude indicators. I need 2 of some other sort of gyro, right? So maybe a standby, a turn indicator or something like that, turn coordinator. I need 2 navigation systems. So VOR, ILS would be one, and then GPS would be another. Would be great. I need some backups. I need options. I need a lot of fuel. Other than that, do I need 2 vacuum sources? No. Do I need 2 alternators? No. But that's kind of my personal minimum is 2 attitude sources. I mean, if you lose one of those and you're in the clouds, then you're in deep trouble. So I need a lot of things telling me which way is up, basically, is what I really need when I'm going in the clouds. Other minimum IFR equipment, things that are just kind of common sense, right? So chargers for the iPad, making sure that you've got multiple ways to charge it, keep it charged, make sure you have backup paper charts in case you need them. Lots of backups. When you're going into instrument conditions, risks are higher, just is. It's more hazardous than flying VFR on a sunny day, and the risks are different, and we need to mitigate those risks with more backups. So you got your bare minimum here, 91205D. And tells you, the basic stuff, 2-way radio communication, rate of turn indicator, stuff like that. But, yeah, I mean, I want to have more, a mode C transponder, ADS-B, all those things. If I'm going to go IFR, I'd like to have, because just better visibility between me and other airplanes, and better visibility for ATC. So things that aren't totally required here, but in my book, I would want to have. So hopefully that answers your question, Jim. If you're just looking for bare minimum legal stuff, 91205 Delta is where you're looking. And Nick, thanks for the notes. I'm glad that we've taught you some stuff. Hopefully you can keep learning. And Derek says, what is the best way to get comfortable with talking to ATC? Practice is the best thing you can do. Live ATC is a good website to listen to. So Live ATC, you can listen to various control towers around the country. Listen to one that is most closely related to your airport. So if you're training out of the Class Delta or Class Charlie, listen to that. Don't bother listening to approach control and stuff too early. Listen to tower and ground more first, and then you can listen to ground or approach later. We are going to put together a little course on basic communications that'll be out on Fly at Mike Alpha. It comes out here early July of 2020. So you will find that there. But honestly, just practice talking with people. There's also things you can use online, like VATSIM or other simulator things where you practice or pretend to talk to ATC. Just practicing with other student pilots on the ground and then getting out there and doing it is the best thing you can do. Also, a really good thing you can do is get up. If you are going to be flying in a local area, like say you fly at a Charlie airport and going in and out of that Charlie is something you do every flight lesson, well then get a script of everything you're going to say to ground, tower, approach, going out and approach back in, and then tower, and then ground on the way back in. Have that script written out, practice that on the ground, and then also bring that in the airplane, because at least if you can read it out and say the words and they come out smoothly, and then you get a smooth, clear response from ATC, that'll help you rather than stuttering and stammering and then ATC not giving you a very clear normal response. If you stutter and stammer on the radio, typically you get super stressed, flustered, and your brain shuts off and you can't hear what they're saying. Then it all just falls apart. So the script thing is also a really good thing to have in the airplane. Also, you can practice on the ground, writing out that script yourself to see what you think they're going to be saying for all these different scenarios. Go over it with your CFI and they can help correct that. If you can anticipate what they're going to say, life gets a lot easier. So until we get that course out in July, your best bets are live ATC. Use those scripts, write some scripts yourself, and possibly that sim, if that's still a thing. I know that was years ago. Yep, International Online Flying Network. They've got guys that pretend to be flight control or ATC controllers in there, and that can be good practice as well. Moving on to the next one. Nick Jack Agleta says, hey there, is there an expiration date on a pilot certificate, and are there costs for renewal? No, there are not. There is no expiration date on your pilot certificate. I'll see if I can pull one random one up here really quick. There will be no expiration date on a random pilot certificate, so we have some random one here that somebody posted online, or I guess this one has everything blocked out here. So date of issue, but no expiration date whatsoever. As far as renewing it, well, every 2 years, or every 24 calendar months at a minimum, you can do it more often, but every 24 calendar months at a minimum, you need to do a flight review. Now, a flight review, you don't have to do it every 2 years, and if you don't do it, well, then you just can't go fly. Say you go 10 years without flying, all you have to do to get current again is go do your flight review. It's not like your certificate's expired. So 6156 tells us the flight review, 1 hour ground, 1 hour flight training. So 1 hour flight time, 1 hour on the ground with CFI. That's the minimum. I never hit those minimums almost ever. I really usually winds up being a little bit more because there's always more to learn with students before you sign them off for this sort of stuff. And as a CFI, I take it on myself as if I sign this guy off, I'm taking responsibility for him for the next 24 months. So I need to make sure he's good to go for the next 24 months to the best of my ability in our short time together. So that is all that's required. You can say, oh man, so every 2 years I got to pay a couple $100 to renew this. Well, no, not really. You can let it lapse. You can go, 10 years without flying and then just pay a couple $100 or $1,000, whatever, whatever it takes, a few flight lessons to get back into it. And you're good to go. No checkride required. I was worried about that when I first was going through flight training. I was like, man, every 90 days I got to go out and do 3 takeoffs and landings if I want to be current and fly with passengers. You wind up doing it anyways, honestly. It's very easy to stay current. It sounds expensive, but it's just a hobby and you will spend the money on it. And then if you haven't done those 3 takeoffs and landings every 90 days, okay, so you can't fly with a passenger, all you have to do is go back out by yourself and do it. Of course, proficiency comes into play here, right? So there's currency, the legal minimums, and there's proficiency. You're probably not proficient if you haven't flown in 3 months to even go fly by yourself, let alone without passengers. You probably want to go find a CFI, pay them a couple bucks, get in the airplane with you, go do a few laps on the pattern, go do some air work, and get proficient again. I know people are concerned about the cost of maintaining their license. It's quite minimal, really, and quite frankly, it's fun. It's an excuse to get out there and go fly. So I would not. I know that sounds silly, right? I'm just telling you, oh, don't worry about it. Just spend the money, don't worry about it. But truly, you won't worry about the cost of maintaining your license. It is minuscule compared to everything else, like going out there and buying an $1,100 Bose headset or something like that. So don't sweat the recurrency stuff too much. It's always good to get more training, and you'll probably pursue more ratings after your private pilot certificate that will help keep you current anyways. So nothing too big to worry about there. Next question we've got here, is there type rating in American Academies? Yeah, you can get type rating here. Yes, you can come over here and do your CFI in the United States. Go to a 141 school. You can get a student pilot visa from a Part 141 school. Sure, there's lots of them. Google them. Absolutely different question. When videoing using GoPro, do you mount on the plane and have them record the entire time, or somehow remotely start and stop recording? We've played around with it many different ways. To get an idea of how we do all that, if you guys want to know, well, you can go to, if you type in FLY8MA and cameras maybe. So cameras we use right there, and also our airplane cameras, the mounts we use right there. So you can see how we mount them all up and how we do everything with all our different camera gear. This is kind of dated now, right? We had a bunch of these little GoPro 3s. We don't use anymore now. We've got a ton of GoPro 6s, 7s, 8s, all that. Bottom line is, yes, we do start them before we get in the aircraft. That way we can sync all of our video off of the prop starting to turn. And then we just let them run. We use battery packs like these external battery packs here to let them run for 4 to 5 hours at a time. We record a ton of footage. It is a pain in the butt. We go out and we easily come back with 300 to 500 gigabytes of footage after a day. If we use good cameras like our big Canon 1D and stuff like that, well, that can be recording 500 megs a second, and we can easily come back with a terabyte of footage after a day of filming if we're using DSLRs as well. So that's but that's how we do it. Obviously, batteries that come in the GoPros don't last that long, 40 to 60 minutes, but that's how we do it anyways, to get the best quality stuff for you guys to put out here on YouTube. Aaron said, question for someone starting on a private pilot license with years of flight sim experience and family work commitments, what's a good lesson pace cadence to shoot for? That is a great question. It's actually something that we had put together a while back here on Fly at Mike Alpha. Right on the homepage, how to become a pilot. You click that button, gives you 3 easy steps. Next step we'll click to, and is it somewhere in here? Is it the final step? I forget where we put it. But somewhere in here, there it is. This kind of gives you an idea of what you can do ground study and reviewing days. You see, just 1 hour a day, 1 hour a day, and flight training, 2 hours a day there, 3 days a week. And what does that get you done? Well, guess what? That gets you done in about just less than 2 months or so. You're a private pilot, all right? So in less than 2 months, you can get this done. Now, with what you've told me, you've got a lot of flight sim experience. That helps, but you've got family and work commitments. If you don't think this schedule would work for you, if you can't find time in this many days, I mean, although it's only an hour here, 2 hours there, an hour there, and so on, if you can't make that happen, well, before all this, of course, is taking our ground school, right? So before all this stuff happens, you take our ground school, and you click that little sign-up button there. That way you can take the written very early on. If you don't think you can make that happen, well, then cut it in half, 4 months. Cut it in a third, 6 months, you can be a pilot. But this is a 2-month schedule to become a private pilot. You start July 1st and you end down here basically, 2 months later, August 5th, is what this schedule is. And then, of course, the next week you go fly somewhere fun because you're a pilot. That is a demo schedule for you. And again, how I got to that was, this is all based on 28 days of actual flying, 85 hours of study time on the ground of your own, total cost of $8,000. If you complete all of these tasks here, okay, it tells you what to do week 1 to 4, week 5 to 9, week 10 to 14, week 15. You can find this, like we said, right on the homepage, flyatmikealpha.com, how to become a pilot, and going through 3 easy steps. Explains to you also in here the difference between, talks about like the flight review costing $200 to $500, so maintaining your license on the first page there. And then it talks about the difference between flying a $300 an hour airplane or a $75 an hour airplane, and how that's going to vary your total cost, your final cost for being a pilot. So somewhere between, you can be a private pilot somewhere between $5,000 and $16,250. Some people cost them $20,000 or more, depending on the airplane they use, how long it takes. Try to do it as quickly as you can. That will save you time and money. Make sure you get that ground school done before you begin flight training. That will save you a lot of time and money. And especially that flight sim experience, that's a huge, huge help. So definitely go for it, and that flight sim experience will help you. Make sure you're doing your flight sim with a Cessna 172 or a Piper Cherokee or something you're going to use in flight training. Don't fly the 747 around. I know it's fun, but fly something that you're going to fly in flight training. That will be a lot more helpful to you when you get in the actual airplane, save you more time and money. Time for a drink. Excuse me. So, Joseph says, what is a good technique to find the wind correction angle for tracking a course to an NDB? Joseph, why are you using NDBs? Those are terrible little devices. Just kidding. They're actually pretty cool. Although for the most part, there's not many working around the country any longer. We can see there's an NDB signal or symbol for Adrian. We used to have one down here in Venice, Florida. I'm pretty sure that thing is gone now, long gone. Man, there's not many of them out there anymore. You know where we still have them? Of course, Alaska. Gotta love Alaska. So, where do we see some NDBs? Well, we got one there at Homer. We can see the symbology for it. I'm looking for just a standalone one. There we go. So there's a nice standalone saw dot, not NDB there. So, what is a good technique to find the wind correction angle for tracking a course to an NDB? Well, typically, I mean, there's a number of different ways to do this. To give you one way, not the best way, but one way that's simple, is put the head of the needle right on the nose of the airplane and start flying towards it. And if it takes, say, 30 seconds, if after 30 seconds you're 5 degrees off, then go ahead and correct 10 degrees in that direction. So after 30 seconds, you're 5 degrees with the needle pointing to the right. Go ahead and correct 10 degrees to the right. And see if that needle comes back in. And if it is coming back in, then great. Then maybe you can have that correction. Just go back to a 5-degree correction instead of 10. If you notice that you're still getting further off course after 30 seconds, give it another 10 degrees to the right and keep trying to correct that way. That's kind of the way I've always done it. There's different ways you can go about doing it. There's math involved, whatever. I like to keep things simple and just kind of trial and error. Also, remember that with NDBs, especially around mountains, you're going to just kind of approximate generally where the needle's pointing. They're not that accurate. And please, before you try to go navigate IFR with an NDB, it's great to have as a backup. It's very cool. You can use it to find lightning, find weather, listen to the radio, a lot of different things. So they are cool devices. Please have a GPS on board just because those are a lot more accurate and safer than NDBs. NDBs are cool though as a backup. It is a good thing to have, but I would way rather have a GPS and VOR than a GPS and NDB. Having all three is cool too if you can handle the weight. Otherwise, you rip that NDB out, you save about 10 pounds. But they are cool devices if you really know how to use them, especially for finding your way around weather or trying to stay away from embedded weather if you're in the clouds. It is cool to have those working on board. Two ways you can use them. You can just tune it to a very low frequency, and typically if there's lightning strikes, the needle will kind of jump and point towards where the lightning is. That's one way. The other way is listen to radio stations where you know the broadcast antenna is, so you know that between you and your destination, towards your destination, there's a certain radio station, AM radio station. You can tune that in, and if there is big clouds between you and that and your destination, and you listen to it and it sounds really clear, well, those big clouds probably aren't too much to worry about. But if it sounds very staticky, well, then there's probably a lot of static electricity in those clouds, probably a lot of convective activity. Probably want to stay away from that. So you can judge based on who you're listening to and where you're listening to it at how good the weather is along that route and if you should stay away from there. So there's a number of different ways you can use NDVs. So they're not totally junk, but they have been removed from the written exam for IFR, and I removed from the ACS as well because they're considered to be older technology from the 20s and 30s, about 100 years old now. Stuart says, for those of us with ambitions of being a charter pilot, regional trips within the state, how many hours of flying is the typical minimum to get a job? Well, legal minimum for Part 135 deals, 500 hours. Not to say you can't get a job sitting right seat in a single pilot airplane, so you're not actually the pilot, but you're just sitting there. Maybe you do a little flying, you work the radio, stuff like that. You can get a job, maybe 250 hours. Now, with all this coronavirus stuff, and there's a little bit of, the pilot shortage isn't quite so severe, maybe now it's going to be 500 or 1,000 hours minimum to get that job. But getting your foot in the door is probably the biggest thing. And just hanging out around the airport and networking. The way you're going to get a job like that is because of who you know, not because of applying to stuff or going online. So you're going to want to hang out around the airport, visit other local airports, put your name out there, talk to guys, see what's available, tell them what you want to do, what you're looking for. And the first chance you get to sit right seat in some stuff, even if it's for free, do it, network, show guys that you know how to fly well, that you can be an asset, you're a good person to have along in the airplane, you're not annoying, and you actually help out, then that will go a long way to getting you that sort of job. And yeah, 250 to 500 hours for very entry-level stuff, on up to 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 hours if you want to be flying, say, a Pilatus or a King Air or something in state, for somebody with a lot of money. RC Warehouse says, do pilots make good money? Sure, they do. There's some very low-paying pilot jobs. There's some really good-paying pilot jobs. It's all across the spectrum. By and large, the average pilot salary, if we look at average pilot salary, right? So just the average. Well, average airline pilot salary, 100 to 160K per year. All right. Average commercial pilot, 36K to 170 per year. So split the difference, right? So was 130 grand. That's a pretty good salary to me, all right? Anything over 75,000 a year, I'd say, is a pretty good salary. That's the average. So yeah, there's some lower ones, 43, 36, guys just starting out. There's some high ones, and guess what? There's some really high ones. If you go to Airline Pilot Central, you want to know what the guys are making at the airlines. Say for these guys that during coronavirus, they're just sitting at home, right? So we go to the legacy carriers and we look at Delta Airlines and we see, okay, what is a guy that's been working at Delta for 12 years and now he's a captain? Not a captain for 7 or 8 years, but he's been working there for 12 years total and he's a captain. Well, let's see here what he could be making. Oh, 300 some dollars per hour-ish, plus multipliers and other things. What are they making to stay at home? Well, these guys are making about $300 an hour times 50 hours a month, or 60 hours a month to stay at home. So they're getting, with their benefits and whatever, about 20 grand a month with their 401k contributions of 16%. Is that still what it is? Yeah. So, and profit sharing, right? So 15% of your paycheck you get as a bonus, or 16.6% for 2020, although those profits won't be super high. 401k contribution, 16% of your salary, also contributed to your 401k on top of the profit sharing. So yeah, they're making good money. You can take this little calculator here and say, well, hey, if somebody was to credit, 110 hours in a month, and he's making $325 an hour, well, he's making $35,000 a month. And if he does that for 12 months, well, he made 420 grand for the entire year. And guess what? There's lots of guys that have been there 20 years that are doing just that. So yeah, pilots make good money. Thanks for letting us know the audio is good, guys. Cole says, I'm currently a student pilot getting my private pilot and entering my 3rd year of college. What would you say is the best way to build time as a private pilot to then go to a flight school post-grad? Well, cost sharing is probably your best bet, right? So your private pilot, see who you can network with around the local airport or the local flight school or whatever, and just sit in there in the right seat while they build some sim time, or possibly you build some sim time. Do cross-country flights. Pick airports that are 50 miles apart or more and go to those airports and take turns. One guy flies there and does the landing, and then you switch seats. The other guy flies back in the left seat with the foggles on, does the landing, gets to log the cross-country and the sim time. And that's a great time to build flight time because you get to split the cost. Both people get to log time. Only one, of course, logs simulated instrument time. Only one logs cross-country time because only one's doing the landing. But you get to log flight time still. That is probably the best way to go about doing it. Again, networking is the best thing. As far as to stay current and proficient, well, if you got the money for it, well, then just go out and fly once a week and take the private pilot ACS. And so just like the commercial pilot ACS, take the private pilot ACS and look at all the maneuvers that has listed on here and pick one of those things to focus on every time you go flying. Pick one or two maybe to focus on when you go flying. Hey, today I'm going to practice my cross-country flight planning, go somewhere, and I'm going to do soft field takeoffs and landings when I get there and then come back. So that's how you can stay proficient. The next flight you go out and you say, I'm really going to focus on, proper pre-flight procedures here, and I'm also going to do some steep turns and some slow flight when I get up to a safe altitude. So those are things you can do to stay proficient if you got the money for it. Again, otherwise, just go out with a safety pilot and go fly and log that flight time as sim time, and also get some cross country that'll help you build the flight time you need for your instrument rating, and you're going to need that here soon when you graduate if that's what you're going for next. So, and then somebody says, Daniel asks, and pros, cons of getting a ground instructor certificate. Really no cons to it. It's going to cost you an FOI written and a AGI written, so it's going to cost you about $300. Cons, none, other than it costs $300. Pros, lots. You get to sign people off for written exams. You don't have to maintain records whether they pass or fail. If you sign somebody off for a written exam with your CFI certificate, you have to maintain a record of whether they pass or fail. You have to maintain a record of whether they pass or fail their Checkride. You have to maintain a record of everyone you endorse for solo flight and all that stuff in 189 record keeping. But there's no record keeping requirements for a advanced ground instructor, an AGI or ground instructor, so it's a great thing to have. It's another certificate to put in your pocket. Wonderful thing. If you ever lose your medical, you can fall back on that. So I think there's lots of pros, not a lot of cons there. Next up, we've got Daniel says, does that good salary include benefits, health, retirement, etc., or is it all pretty much 1099 work? I'm not sure which job you're specifically referring to, Daniel, but yeah, the airlines have great benefits. Starting jobs, sometimes they're 1099. Starting CFI jobs can oftentimes be 1099, even though they really should not be. But that's just how a lot of flight schools do it. Again, you can name your own deal if you just want to run your own company, right? Be your own independent instructor. It's going to be 1099, of course, you're self-employed, but you can name your price and make a lot more. And yeah, so there's a number of different jobs out there. You can comfortably get a good pilot job, entry level, like we saw those entry level wages, that is W-2, that has health and retirement, etc. When you hit the 500 hour, 1,000 hour, 1,500 hour mark. So there are jobs out there for that. Joseph says, what reading material can you recommend before buying my first airplane? Well, Joseph, I would say, what reading material could I recommend? There's not a lot of great reading material. Again, we do mostly YouTube. So I would say your best bet right now, flyatmikealpha.com flight training YouTube channel. We have 2 channels, don't get confused. Playlists and what's inside of an airplane video series is right here. And this is what you would want to start looking at. You can also go online because what do we have here so far? We've got 4 or 5 videos out. Another one comes out here today at 3:15 from this series of what is inside the airplane, what you can be looking for before you buy one. There's a lot more of that stuff on flyatmikealpha.com. When you go to Fly at Mike Alpha and you click on or hover over courses and you go to the Cherokee video series, we're going to have all 100 videos up. You do have to log in to get to that. We'll have all 100 videos up from that series so you can really learn a lot about what's inside of them, what you should be looking for. And the other thing I will tell you about buying an airplane, a really important thing you should be doing is going to the FAA website and do a N number search. So a couple different things we can do. First, let's say you want to buy November 9907 whiskey. That was one that we were doing a project with here. So I'm going to go to aviationdb.com, aircraft November 9907 whiskey. I'm going to run the query for it, and I'm going to say DY78, do that whole little CAPTCHA thing. And what I'm looking at here is who's owned it, how often has it changed hands? Well, it changed hands quite a bit over its life. There might be a problem with it because it keeps changing hands pretty often here, but there's no incidents, no accidents, nothing like that found. Let's go ahead here and look up something like 578 Mike Alpha, something you guys might be familiar with. Ooh, that one actually needs to be A3275. This is a fun thing to look up, any airplane that you're flying, if you want to look up and see if there's anything in the database on it. So here, we can see that 578 Mike Alpha, the old airplane, was held for a number of years by Joseph Ferrari, so it should be okay, right? And he bought it in 2001, it looks like. And, here we have an accident. Lost power, landed in the field, was out of fuel, got fuel, tried to take off, wing hit corner of stock building, then a fence. That's not good. So when that occurred, 1995. You see something like that occur in 1995, and then, now it's 25 years later. Is it a big deal? Maybe, maybe not. You probably need to look at those wings real closely. In fact, this airplane never flew right because the wings were jacked up. Not that you could visually see anything, something was bent just by a few millimeters, and that made all the difference in the world. One developed way more lift than the other. And when I bought it, actually somebody had put 10 pounds of lead in one of the wingtips to try to make it fly straight. That really did not do the trick. So it was basically sold off for parts because, just not the best thing out there. This is a good place to start. The other place I was talking about that is really important to look up is to find all the 337s, any sort of other damage that might be not reported in the NTSB database. That's what this is looking up, aviationdb.com. If we go to the FAA website, you should request the CD-ROM, the records, and you can do that somewhere in here. And we want to look, request for aircraft records online, and it's $10 to get the CD. So let's say I want to do 578MA. I'm going to go ahead and type in the serial number of the aircraft as well. Very easy to find the serial number because it's in all the registration stuff. So when you have the N number, you can come here to, say I just type in N578MA. Well, on FlightAware, I can easily find the serial number of the aircraft by the N number, punch that into the FAA database, add that to cart, pay $10. About 2 weeks later, they'll mail you the CD-ROM and it has all the records from the airplane that have been filed with the FAA. Again, it doesn't guarantee that there's no damage, but that's a good place to start. So those are the things I look at when I am looking at buying an airplane. You should get with the CFI, Joseph, and have them help you pick one out, because they're going to be best to recommend what you need to start with. I typically recommend guys rent for the first, for their private, and then buy after getting their private, because you typically don't want to fly a trainer around forever, and you don't want to learn in something that's not a trainer. So Alex Nunes says, good afternoon, can you send me info on your ground school? I want to get my PPL, please send it to me at Alex. Okay, well, Alex, really easy to find out information on the ground school, nothing really to send you, it's all on the website here. You can take the free course right there, Private Pilot Courses or free courses, click on that. You can jump right into the Private Pilot course, and if you want to get the written exam done and you want the endorsement for your written exam, then you can go ahead and complete our premium course. You can go to subscription options. You can click on Flight Engineer. That's the cheapest one. That'll give you access to that course. Or First Officer gives you access to all of our courses on the site. You can hit enroll, you sign up, and then once you're all logged in, then you'll be able to see all of your courses appear on the left-hand side of the screen under My Courses. So we'll get that right there, My Courses. That's where you'll click once you're logged in, and you'll see all of your courses in there. Lots of courses on the site. So, moving on to the next question. Marie Pacolet. There is a college in my area which has a 4-year aviation course and gives both private and commercial pilot licenses with an instrument rating. Would you say this is a good option? Well, Marie, all depends on how much it costs and what the students say about that school, what their pass rates are. It deserves a lot more research than that, right? I'm not a huge fan of those schools, typically because they cost a lot more than just getting a 4-year degree separately and doing your flight training separately. But not always. Sometimes it is a good deal, and it's a lot of fun to go to a school like that. So I would do some more research, ask to talk to some of their current students, some of their past students who have graduated, find out how much they're really spending to go there, and talk to some local DP examiners about what their pass rates are like at those schools and what their average hours are that they're seeing people actually earn their licenses in. That'll give you a good idea of how much it costs as well. Don't expect flight schools, when they're in their sales pitch mode, to always be totally honest with you about how many hours it's going to take and how much it's really going to cost in the end. Talk to their past clients, and then realize that that doesn't guarantee it's going to cost you that much. It could be more, it could be less, always. Richard, love the channel. Thank you. Appreciate it. We love you, Richard. Kobe says, your videos helped me a lot in adjusting to fly in the U.S. when I was doing my hour building. Greetings all the way from Poland. That's awesome. Glad you came over here to fly in the States. It's always fun flying around here. This country is built to fly. Hopefully I'll get to go fly in Poland sometime. That is where my ancestors are from. My last name, Katwicki, or Katwicki, the proper way to say it. I've never been to Poland yet, so that's still on the list. Grab card, yes, that is a good one for remembering your instruments for IFR flight, or just 91205 Delta. I remember numbers easier than I remember what acronyms stand for. Joe Smith says, I have my private pilot in around 315 hours. Ooh, that's a good amount. Have all my cross-country, IFR, and my commercial written tests done. Then COVID hit. Should I continue my training? My goal is anything in the 135 or 121 world. Thank you. Yes, absolutely. You should continue your training. Continue building flight time. Yes, you do need 500 hours to get to those 135 mins. You'll need 1,500 for the 121 world. But absolutely continue training, and now is a good time to double down, because it sounds like you're still at least 6 months or a year from getting hired, possibly 2 years from getting hired if you want to go 121, and things are going to be looking a lot better in the airline industry 2 years from now, so keep at it now. Do not let time go to waste. It all matters about when you get on that seniority list, whether it's 135 or 121, you want to get hired as soon as possible, so keep training now, get hired as soon as possible, and the sooner you get hired, the sooner you will have a better quality of life and make more money. Omar says, after watching a couple of Beechcraft twins accident, what is the definitive course of action upon one engine failure on a twin after rotation? Okay, well, not a definitive course of action, but I can give you one option. So you rotate and you're at 30 or 40 feet and an engine totally quits. Or worse, it mostly quits, but you can't get it feathered, and so it's just a ton of drag. And if you pull back both throttles, well, you're going to land and hit a fence. I'd probably land and hit the fence at that point. I had an engine quit. I don't care. I don't want to die. So I'm not going to try to be a hero and bring this thing back around the pattern. I'm going to look pretty much right in front of me, pull the throttles back, and the only thing that other engine's doing for me is either making me land, crash a little bit longer or a little bit shorter than I want it to. It's adjusting where the crash site is, but there's going to be a crash, and I'm going to do it wings level the best I can, which means getting the power off of the operating engine so I don't have all that adverse yaw and adverse lift, and I make sure that I'm not getting too slow there. That's me. That's not like the proper answer. The proper answer is, oh, well, you apply rudder, dead foot, dead engine, and you feather, identify, verify, feather, and you climb away, because any airplane, any twin should be able to climb on one engine, in theory, as long as you're not too high density altitude and too heavy and all that good stuff. But then there's the reality. Most of these twins barely climb on one engine, if at all. So yeah, I'd probably just, if I'm going to fly a twin, it's going to be on super, super duper long runways, like really like 7,000 feet for, a Seminole or something like that. Even 5,000 feet, I think, is short for those twins when you're training, because they're trainers and they're prone to problems and maintenance issues. So yeah, I'm going to be operating on really big runways, and if something goes wrong on a really short runway, well, it's just going to be a crash. So that's why I try to stay away from short runways with twins. They're good for some stuff, and they cause a lot of other problems. The twins, although you think they're safer, you're way more likely to die losing one engine in a twin than losing one engine on your one-engine airplane. So you can have no engines in your single-engine airplane. You have a better chance of survival from that scenario than you do of losing one engine on a twin. That's just statistics and just facts, all right? So you can say, oh, I train, I practice, I do all these things. Yeah, well, facts are facts. So part of it is a lot of guys own twins. They don't fly a lot, and they're not maybe that proficient. Maybe that's part of it, but either way, I don't think my piloting ability is so superior that I would be able to fly an engine with, fly a twin on one engine around the pattern. I would probably just accept the crash and slide it into the fence at the edge of the airport. Live ATC helps you out. That is awesome. It is a good website. Daniel Dillon, flight review. I went about 15 years without going into the sky. Got my flight review, back at it. Best thing I've ever done. Back in the sky. Daniel, that is awesome. Very glad to hear that. Anyone out there that is rusty or hasn't flown in a number of years, does not cost much. $500 to $1,000 is pretty much what it takes to get somebody back in the left seat. That includes your medical, your flight review, getting you proficient again, all that. Totally worthwhile to do it, especially now when gas is cheap. Remember, avgas is like $2.50 a gallon right now in some places. Cheapest it's going to be for a long time. Merrick says, I was taught to quickly switch the mags from both to off and back again at idle power when shutting down the plane to test P leads, but this contradicts your last video. What gives? Well, Merrick, I'm not sure that you watched the full video then. Or you might be misunderstanding something from your training. So, in that last video that we just put out, the backfiring issue is because people are switching the mags to off when you are at high RPM, 1700, 2000 RPM, stuff like that. All right. Doing a P-lead check, I think we talked about in this video, and that's totally fine because that's done at 800, 600, maybe 1,000 RPM at most. You don't get that nasty explosive afterfire in the exhaust. So you probably won't hear a backfire, more correctly called an afterfire, but watch that video again and listen a little closer and see if you hear that explanation. Because doing a P-lead check is totally fine at low RPM. If you try to do your P-lead check at 2,000 RPM, you're going to get that big, gigantic bang. Oh, and this is fun. That's another video we have about the whole tow bar situation. You can probably guess what happens there. What's going to happen? Yeah, it was quite interesting. Deep Sky Dude, can you show me some tips to pass my PPL written? I'm having issues with the various charts and crosswind stuff. Have you been through our private pilot ground school? Because that's what I would refer you to. In that private pilot ground school, we have now a lot of videos we've added, and we're adding more every day to our premium private pilot ground school for all those computation questions. For example, the performance charts you're talking about when you come here to the performance quiz in lesson 12, for example, airplane performance, weight, and balance. We have a ton of videos just before that quiz that take you through calculate fuel burn, max crosswind, finding crosswind headwind component, landing distance calculation, moving weight on a plank to balance on the fulcrum thingy, balance weight and balance, or basic weight and balance computation with the calculator, density, altitude change, all of those things are in there now. So that is what I would refer you to. The link directly to that, if you are a member on the site, that link will take you directly to that. Otherwise, you're going to need to sign into the site to get to that course. Nick says, should a new student pilot purchase an aircraft to train on? Would love to end up with a Bonanza, but my CFI thinks I should train on 172. What do you think? I think you should rent because you're not going to save a drastic amount of money. In fact, if you get a Bonanza to train on, it's probably going to cost you more than the 172 to run it, the maintenance and all the beating you're going to do on it. I think you should train in a 172, in a 170, in a 140, a Champ, a tailwheel airplane. I think you should train in a tailwheel airplane. I love tailwheel airplanes. I think you should train in an old, cheap tailwheel airplane. And if that's not available, then yeah, sure, 172 or 150 is fine. And then buy a Bonanza, yes. Get the private pilot knocked out, and then buy the airplane. That is what I would recommend. That's what I typically recommend to guys. You may, as you fly more and get more acquainted with aviation, you may change your mind of what aircraft you really want to own. I would hate to see you buy a Bonanza, only to figure out that what you really want is a Mooney or something else, and then you would have to turn around and sell it. So, also Bonanza insurance, way more money when you're a student pilot in low time, so it'd be best to rent, build up some flight time before you hop into a retract. Otherwise, you're going to pay through the nose through insurance. You could easily put all that insurance money towards renting. It'll save you a lot. Expect to pay easily $3,000 a year for a $100,000 Bonanza when you're a student pilot like that, possibly $4,000 to $5,000 per year for that airplane on insurance. When on a 172, if you bought that as a student pilot, you probably pay about $1,000 a year, maybe somewhere in that range. And if you do rent one, well, you can pay no insurance. You can get a renter insurance policy, about $100 a year, pretty cheap. Eugene Arasa says, what unit of time must be used when filing flight plans? Is it Zulu time? Yes, it is. Everything is done in Zulu time, so we don't get confused with those time zones. So easiest thing to do in the world is just Zulu. And oh, yeah, actually I have to do Zulu time. There you go, 6:28 p.m., 18:28 Zulu right now, GMT. Next up, we've got, I lost track of all this stuff. Shocker 31, I'm certified as a commercial instrument, single engine land, and haven't flown an airplane in 4 years. If I go get a flight review done, will I have to perform at the commercial PTS standards? Well, it has been 4 years since you've been flying because we don't use the commercial PTS anymore. We use the commercial ACS, Airman Certification Standards. And if you came to me, this is how I conduct my flight reviews, I would not be hammering you for Chandels and Lazy 8s and 8s and Pylons or anything like that. We would do basic private pilot stuff, and I would get you to a point where I feel comfortable signing you off as a student pilot to go solo. That would earn you your flight review endorsement once you've demonstrated you're competent as a private pilot, basically. And then I would counsel you and talk to you about, hey, you really need to go out there and fly another 5, 10, 15 hours before you put a passenger on board. You know, and work your way back into this. But if you're safe by yourself, there's no sense for you to pay me $100 an hour to sit there in the right seat and basically just babysit you at that point. Obviously, there's some more I could teach you, but law of diminishing returns, you're going to get less and less for each hour we spend together. So I would rather just see you spend maybe 2, 3, 4, or 5 hours with me, and then you get out there on your own, spend 5, 10, 15 hours on your own, and then you'll be just fine. You'll be back to those standards. But no, I'm not going to expect you to be doing Chandel. I would never ask to see an 8s on pylons for a flight review, especially in that case when you haven't been flying in 4 years. Each instructor can conduct their flight reviews differently, but I think for the most part, most of us would not be interested in seeing your 8s on pylons or your Lazy 8 or anything like that, really. Some guys show up in your case and they want to do those things because they want to be as good as they once were, and that's cool. We're happy to work with you on it, but just from a pure safety standpoint, no, it's not really required. All right, gonna be wrapping up here shortly. A few more questions we'll try to jump into here. We'll try to rattle through these. We will not be doing a CFI live session next week because we will be en route to Alaska. We'll be flying the Bearhawk Patrol from Venice to Anchorage, or really Soldovia. So it is a rather long flight. If you guys want to see what it is KVNC to Paso is the airport we're going to. So from Venice to Paso via, we are stopping in St. George, or really Hurricane, Utah. So yeah, it's going to be a long trip. We can drag that line on down here towards somewhere down around there. And that's going to be our route of flight. We're expected, oh, and I'm also stopping through Salt Lake, I forgot. Yep, forgot about that one. There we go. So yeah, we'll be kind of cruising along the Florida Panhandle and then coming up through here, jumping across just south of the Colorado Plateau, and then cruising north Salt Lake through Bellingham, and then into Ketchikan, through Yakutat, and over to Saldovia. It's going to be about a 10-day trip, most likely. So we won't be doing a CFI Live for possibly a week or two. We will be ending these as this whole stay-at-home order stuff ends. We will be continuing CFI Live for all of our members online at flyatmikealpha.com. If you guys are not a member, you can sign up on there. Cheapest membership is $100 a year right now. So other than that, if you guys really, really like these, then let us know and maybe we will continue doing them. But of course, you can just message us through Instagram or Facebook or email. And as always, you can always ask us questions through the Ask a Question button at the top of the page, even if we're not doing CFI Live. So next question, we'll try to rattle through a few more of these for the next 5 minutes and then wrap this one up. And can you explain the crosswind component and load factor? Not sure what you mean by that, Telvin, but actually, crosswind component, all explained in these videos here in Lesson 12 quiz, in the Lesson 12 section of the Premium Private Pilot Ground School, and load factor is explained a little bit earlier on in the aerodynamics section, so check that out if you still have questions. Then hit that Ask a Question button at the top of the page on flyatmikealpha.com. And next, let's see. Jeffrey says, I'm having a blast taking your online private pilot course, and I'm 72. That is awesome, Jeffrey. I'm glad to hear you're doing it. That is great. Brandon, should I learn any low-wing or high-wing airplane if I intend to get a bush plane at some point? I also want an RV at some point. Which is easier to transition to, lower high-wing or higher low-wing? They're all the same. Airplane's an airplane. Does not matter. Training in Cherokee 140, training in 172, they are quite frankly the same. If you want to get into a bush plane, well, you're probably going to be flying something tailwheel. Better yet, start off in a tailwheel airplane. It will likely be a high-wing airplane. Most tailwheels are high-wing airplanes. There are some low-wing tailwheels like RVs, but you should start training in preferably a Champ or a J3 or a Cub or something like that. I think would be your best bet, in my opinion. If you have to do nose wheel, 172, 150, Cherokee 140, all those are fine. Cessna 140 is cool too. Don't discount that one. Cessna 120 or 140. Jason, for 180s, how do you feel about adding extra flaps, well, and ground effect to extend the glide? 180s what? Cherokee 180s, Cessna 180s, 180 horsepower 172s. Jason, if you could clarify that for me. If it's a Cherokee 180, yeah, sure, that's like a cheat people use on the commercial pilot Power Off 180. It's fine. It's not great, but yeah, I mean, do what you can to hit your point, right? It works. Some examiners get really upset about it, and I mean, they'd have to fail you for something like destabilizing the approach, or if it's really squirrely because you're reaching for flaps or doing something like that. Some of them would rather just see you be 5 feet short rather than nail your mark and be messing with flaps in the last little bit there. Make sure you talk to your CFI about what that particular DP is looking for. But yeah, it's a trick that can be used in any airplane, really. So yeah, as far as advanced technique versus dangerous change, it can be dangerous to change configuration so low. Certainly, I mean, it's taking your attention away from other things. So let me know which airplane you're actually talking about, Cherokee or Cessna, or you're talking about the Power Off 180 for commercial, or what exactly you're referring to. How many more hours do you need ground plus flight time to become a CFI? Nick Jack Aguilera asked. Well, actually, you just need to have a commercial and instrument rating. So 250 is the minimum to become a CFI. There's no extra additional ground or flight time after that, just the bare minimum to be trained for the rating. So the 3 hours prior to the check ride and whatever hours it takes to hit the minimum ground training with your CFI to go for the CFI check ride and get that endorsement. Brander Espinal says, I took your ground school and got a 92. That is awesome. Glad to hear. Brett, do they even train for NDB approaches anymore? No. When I did my checker in 1980, it consisted of 4 NDB approaches that I nailed and 1 ILS I did okay on. Have never flown anything with glass or GPS. Well, Brent, NDBs have been removed from the Instrument Pilot ACS as well as the Instrument Pilot Written Exam. We don't talk about them anymore really in training It's just they're 100 years old, so we just don't use them anymore. There's other stuff that's more applicable for the National Airspace System today. Let's see if we can get through all these. Thoughts of getting your PPL by joining local Civil Air Patrol? Well, Blaine, that's cool. It's a good way to do it, but it'll take forever, and the amount of time you put into it, in my personal opinion, depending on the unit. Some of them are better than others. Some of them will get you flight time. They have active flight instructors that will fly with you. Others will make you put in so many hours of volunteer work that it becomes pointless, and you just stand around marching in circles, it seems, and never fly. So, and you're better off putting that time towards, like, washing cars and cutting grass and working at McDonald's or whatever to make more money to put towards just renting an airplane. But it's an option. Check out on your local unit, talk to them, see, and be upfront about it. Hey, I want to join CAP because I want to be a private pilot. Can you guys help me? And what do you want out of me for you guys to give me this basically for free? And are at a very reduced cost. And talk to them about it. If it's a good deal, go for it. But again, you might be better off just working at the local FBO, being a line guy, fueling airplanes, and saving up money that way to credit towards flight time and renting airplanes. Cool, Alex. Let us know if you have any questions as you jump into that ground school. Daniel, if I'm getting flight following and need to descend through one Class D for arrival into another Class D, and approach control during flight following gives frequency change when I'm already in the Class D, am I in violation? No, we talked about this earlier on, and so you might just rewatch this and play back that earlier on section. Basically, it is you have to be talking to the tower for that airspace, or for the controlling agency for that airspace. But they can easily take care of that by just calling on the landline and taking care of it, so you don't have to call that tower. So just clarify with approach. So if ever in doubt, if you think maybe I should be talking to somebody else, clarify with whoever you're talking to if you should be talking to somebody else, or if they've already called on the landline for you. That was the gist of what we talked about at the beginning of this session. Arnav says, I'm 15, planning to start my PPL next year. I have done a great deal of research and I'm excited to start my career in aviation. Just wondering if I'll be too late to be part of the pilot shortage. No, not at all. The reality is you have 6 years until anybody's going to consider really hiring you at the airlines. Things will be amazing in 6 years, barring another wave of some god-awful virus from China. Things will be really good. The pilot shortage will be in full swing probably in 2 to 3 years. Really, really huge pilot shortage in 2 to 3 years from now, as long as things continue going the way they are, going well, recovering the way they're supposed to. And so, no, you're not too late. You're actually in a great spot. Also, any other tips or things to consider for a pilot career? Well, Arnav, just study as much as you can, get all those ratings, hang it around the airport, network, get all the flight time you can, never pass up free flight time, wash airplanes, do whatever you can to get out there and get flying. Daniel says, gas may be cheap, but rental rates have not dropped, at least not in your area. Well, talk to your flight school about why they haven't dropped. Could be because their insurance rates have gone up. Could be because just less people are renting airplanes. I know rental rates have actually decreased around here in Florida and a little bit in Alaska because fuel has decreased by about $2 per gallon so far. So it just depends. But certainly, as an aircraft owner, I have thoroughly enjoyed the cheaper avgas. It is half price from what we were paying before, and is awesome for us right now. Brent says, did my tailwheel training in a Strawberry in 79 with a glider in tow. First tow, 8 a.m., first tow solo, 12:30 p.m., have 1,500 tows in the log now. It was almost a year before I did not have a glider in tow. Cool, that's awesome. That's kind of sketchy. I hate towing gliders. Feels like you're going to fall out of the sky at any point, but yeah, it's definitely a cool way to do it. Good way for somebody else to pay for your flight time. Is there an FAA regulation against a student flying in the right seat? Brian Davis asks. No, but it's not smart if you're the only one on board. If you're going solo, you should be sitting in the left seat. And as far as some airplanes I've flown in, the brakes are only in the left seat, period. There's only toe brakes and only on the left side, meaning guess what? I sit on the left side for the first couple lessons until I start trusting that student, and then we do a lot of taxi practice, getting them used to those brakes, and then we go fly, and I fly around without any brakes at all, and it is super sketchy, but that's just how some airplanes are. So some tailwheel airplanes out there are like that, and nothing wrong with us switching seats, especially when there's an instructor on board. but you shouldn't be switching seats just because if you're normally sitting in the left seat, that's where you should sit. You should keep that normal sight picture for yourself and not get crisscrossed with your hands and all that. Talk to your CFI about it. Arnav, thanks for the answer. And yeah, my name sounds sort of like Arnav, like an Arnav approach. I know, yeah, it's an awesome name. Actually, it's fun to say. And Jason clarified, Cessna 172 power off 180s. Yeah, you can bump in some flaps in the last little bit, but just like your CFI told you, it is more of an advanced maneuver. It's kind of tricky. It's kind of dangerous. You probably don't want to be doing that too often. It will make some DPs angry if you're doing that power off 180 and you're making it work by just touching those flaps, but it also shows that you understand what the flaps do in ground effect versus out of ground effect, and that's really the point of the maneuver, is to show mastery of the aircraft. Talk to your DP about it beforehand, honestly. Just ask them, hey, if I'm coming up short, I know I can go from 20 to 30 flap and make this thing coast and hit the spot. Is there any reason that would not meet the criteria set forth within the ACS? Could you clarify that for me? Would that be risky or hazardous, or would that be complying with the ACS? Get their opinion. If they say, no, it's risky or hazardous, well, then you probably shouldn't do it. Last question we're going to take, and we're done for today. Adewal all around says, how much does it cost to do a private pilot or a commercial pilot in your flight academy? Please, Will. So you can do all of your ground school. You can sign up for the lifetime membership. Right now it's discounted to $1,500. That's all the ground school. As far as the flight time, depends where you do it. We do not offer a full 0 to commercial pilot program flight training. We do flight instruction up in Alaska. We don't do anything for international students right now because we are not 141 approved. That may be coming sometime here in 2020. Later on, maybe somewhere in the lower 48, we'll be setting up a flight school. But in the meantime, we don't do any of that. You can expect for the ground school, like we said, it's $1,500 for all the ground school courses that you'll ever need. And then as far as the actual flight training portion, schools around here advertise anywhere from $30,000 to $100,000, or, well, regardless of what they advertise, they're somewhere between $30,000 and $100,000, more like $40,000 and $100,000. Depends where you go. Talk to the students that have graduated there, find out how much they spent. That will give you a good idea of how much you will spend. And that is it for us, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Any other questions? You guys know what to do. Go to flyatmikealpha.com. Hit the Ask a Question button there. We'll go ahead and drop the link in here for you guys. And we'll see you guys in the next one. Be safe out there.